Idaho Booktube. I am Sadie. I am your hostess with the mostest, maybe? I don't know. My hair is horrible, and I am a little sore because I did the chiropractor this morning, and I am coming to you right after doing a knitting podcast, so I'm a little... But we're gonna do this because it's like the second week of June, and I still haven't done my May Wrap Up, and I read a butt ton, or I finished a butt ton in May. So let's start. This one actually, I finished it in April. It was the last day of April. And regroup. I'm not editing this. This is the last thing I read in April, and I had already podcasted my April wrap-up, which is why I didn't get in there. It is a body farm novel. It's called The Devil's Bones. It's by Jefferson Bass, which is actually a hybrid of two people. One is Dr. William Bass, or Bill Bass, of the Body Farm fame. He is probably the leading forensic anthropologist in the world. Aside from Kathy Reichs, they tend to be very closely related in terms of well-known popular forensic anthropologists. They earned their stripes, they deserve to be there, I am not disputing that. And John Jefferson is the co-writer who's basically the guy who knows how to write stuff, I guess, because Dr. Bill Bass writes technical most of the time. And I really wanted to love this. Okay, I've read the non-fiction Bill Bass work, like Death's Acre, about the Body Farm, or The Body Farm. There's a Death's Acre, Beyond the Body Farm. He had two non-fiction books he wrote about the Body Farm, specifically how he started it, what it does, and those are great books, especially if you're looking to learn and understand what the Body Farm is, which is a place in Tennessee where they conduct experiments on dead bodies. You can donate your body to science to be housed there. They have like the most like huge receptacle of bones and skeletons for learning purposes. It's one of the meccas for forensic anthropologists, and I know this because I studied. My degree is in sociocultural anthropology, specializing in medical anthropology. I did time in archaeology and biophysical anthropology, which leads to forensic anthropology. I switched universities halfway through to be closer to my family, and subsequently did not continue pursuing forensic anthropology. I did want to go into that field, so I know a fair bit about it, and I have to tell you, I dislike this book so much. I gave it 3 stars, maybe. It deserved 2. And it's the second in a series that I didn't know, and probably should have read the first in the series. Not that it would have made any difference. I didn't care. I read it really fast. It was good pulp. It distracted me when I needed distraction. But was it good enough that I could tell you the characters' names or what happened 1 month later? No. No. And I remember thinking, okay, this is going away. When I'm done, I'm not keeping this. And it's true, I'm not. I love you, Dr. Bass, Dr. Bill Bass, PhD, but I don't love these. And which is sad, because I do enjoy Kathy Reichs' works, the Temperance Brennan novels. This one is a little too pulpy. Just a little too pulpy for me. And I like pulp, so like... And if you haven't read the first one, you're left wondering halfway through what the heck is going on, and why the main character is patterned off of Bill Bass, but doesn't seem to have the same, like, it makes me wonder if this is like he's trying to portray something that really happened, or he's fabricating something based on real events. You don't really understand where it's coming from. It says his blood pressure raising, according to the Knoxville News Sentinel. I would disagree. Even if you like this stuff, I mean, if you can get it at a library and read it in a day, more power to you, but don't buy it. Then I read Whistling Past the Graveyard, an acclaimed bestseller from award-winning author Susan Crandall. I picked this up at Target a while ago because I read the back and I thought it was amazing. So I'll read the back to you, and then I will tell you what occurs. In the summer of 1963, 9-year-old Starla Claudel runs away from her strict grandmother's Mississippi home. Starla's destination is Nashville, where her mother went to become a famous singer, abandoning Starla when she was 3. Walking a lonely country road, Starla accepts a ride from Eula, a black woman traveling alone with a white baby. Now, on a road trip that will change her life forever, Starla sees for the first time life as it really is, as she reaches for a dream of how it could one day be. Okay, so now that I've just read that to you, I would like to also point out that Susan Crandall is very, very clearly white. And that is probably the big problem with this book, is that we have a main character who is a black woman in the 60s in Mississippi who is coming into all of these problems and squeaking by the skin of her teeth merely because this white woman is writing it, because there's no way that it... No. Okay? She stole a white baby. She stole a white baby and she had a white child in her car. Do you honestly think anyone would have let her get by? No. There's your first problem. Your second problem is everything bad that happens gets resolved really quickly. And not, like, our main character, without, okay, mild spoiler, but not really, our main character is about to witness some people who want to rape Eula just on the street. They've seen her, they're drunk, it's late at night, there's an alleyway, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, a preacher appears and saves her. Like, that's just the kind of thing that keeps happening in this. It makes no sense. And then all of a sudden, we're all tied up with a bow at the end. This is a horrible book. It was, like, I might have given it a 3. You could read it on the beach if you wanted to, but it's really problematic when you have a white woman writing about race the way she is, because it's so privileged. And maybe it's just that I'm not white, so I understand that they're, like, it's like, oh. And then every now and then you'll have a black person say, but it's different for black people. That's why this white child doesn't understand. And it's like, is that supposed to negate? Is that the racial conversation we're having here? You could have dug into so much more meaty things with this, but no. So a kid runs away from family, gets to Nashville, mother doesn't want her, gets sent back home. That's the basic summary of this. But we have all these problematic things happening to this poor black woman, and none of them get tied up. And it's written really poorly, and it's basically a caricature. So just skip by it unless it's the only thing you can read. Then I needed something to cleanse the palate. So I read volume 2 of Cheese Sweet Home. And if you like manga, it's full color manga. It's gorgeous. It's well drawn. It's actually a cartoon. In Japan, it's an anime you can watch. And I love this guy, the big bear cat. I love him. And he comes back, and I love him. I love Chi, because Chi looks like Frank. So second volume, same basic premise. We follow Chi as Chi gets a new home and learns a new area and does crazy kitty things. So if you like manga about cute cats, it's great. If you have a child who is trying to find something to read, they're very into cats, this is perfect. I recommend it for any age. If you want to read it to your child, also very good. There's nothing remotely questionable in there. It's just cute and fun. Now, because the hubby was home, I decided I needed some horror in my life. The first thing I read was Last Days by Adam Neville, which I got at a friend's library sale, so it's a used library copy. A friend of mine, Heidi, had recommended this on her podcast, Undead Yarns, and I tend to listen to her because she has really good taste. The Britain's answer to Stephen King across the top kind of threw me for a loop because I don't like Stephen King. But I just don't. I'm one of those people. And so I read this. The premise being, you've got a documentary filmmaker who's been approached by this company to make a documentary film about a cult that existed back in the 70s? 60s and 70s? 75. So this cult that existed in 75, it went from Britain to America. It was basically a giant death cult, kind of paralleling a little bit of the Manson murders, a little bit of, like, those kinds of things. Not necessarily, it goes so sideways that, like, even if you were to try and draw more than 3 parallels to the Manson murders, you couldn't. Like, that's the only cult I can think of to recommend on it, based on the premise that there is some paranormal experiences going on here, wherein this cult has somehow managed to summon evil and imbue it into a body. And as we're going through this, we find out that the documentary filmmaker and his crew are being sucked in to fueling this thing that needs people, that relied on the cult to supply it with people, but that needs people to feed it so it can become bigger and eventually come back. It's a big honkin' beastie of a book, but you know, it took me like 3 days. It was awesome. If you like horror books and you like creepy books, it is perfect. It's got this unsettlingness to it all. It starts out a little slow and you're like, really? There's a point at about 53 pages where I'm like, really, Heidi, what are you sending me into? This may be Stephen King. And then all of a sudden shit hits the fan and it just keeps hitting. And as you come into all these twists and turns, it's kind of like House of Leaves in that way, where everything is just warped and it keeps getting more and more warped. Right up till the very end. Like, I couldn't put it down. I couldn't stop reading it. It was wonderful. And I don't want to tell you too much about it because then I will be giving away spoilers and plot twists and turns, but all we really need to know is that he's doing a documentary film about a cult. And basically, at this point, the Blair Witch has come out, so people like know of that style of documentary filmmaking. The documentary filmmakers are experienced with this because they did one on like black death metal and stuff. So they are experienced with dealing with crazy things, but they don't really know what they're getting into. Loved it. Horror fans? Yes. Am I going to pick up more by Adam Neville? You bet your bippy. Do I think he's the Stephen King of Great Britain? No, because I don't like Stephen King. He's a good horror writer. So then I decided, this came, my book of the month. This was last month's, I believe. No, this was the month before the last month came. And it's One Day We'll All Be Dead and None of This Will Matter by Sachi Cole, which you may have seen on other channels, including Rincey Reads. And I have to say, this is written by a woman who lives in Toronto, or Ontario. Does it say Toronto? Yes, she lives in Toronto. She currently lives in Toronto. She's from Calgary, and she's an Indian. Not a me Indian, the other kind of Indian. There's a picture of her. Isn't she adorable? And, you know, I read this, and I read it in one sitting, and I loved it so much. I laughed, I cried. You know, I laughed, I cried, I blew chunks. Bill and Ted. Like, this is not going to be everybody's cup of tea. And perhaps if you've never had an experience like this, or you don't understand what this life is like, it will seem very glib to you. I did read, I have a friend on Goodreads who kind of panned it and said it was okay, but not that great. And I was like, that's because you're not a Canadian and you're not brown. I think if you are brown or brown Canadian, this is going to get to you. Even Canadians will probably get a lot of this stuff. Like, she grew up on the prairies. I grew up about 8 hours away from Calgary, which is the equivalent of growing up in North Dakota as opposed to Montana. And so everything she's saying in this is just so humorous, like about policing your body hair, about how people objectify your cultural practices. Like, she discusses how everybody's all into this idea of an Indian wedding, and I get it, because for me, it's the First Nations or Indigenous, everybody's into the powwow or the sweat, and they want to be that, and they don't understand what it is at all. Or she has this one called Hunting Season. If you are remotely triggered by rape, etc., you might want to stay away from that. But it's like, yes, I've been there, I've seen that, and Like, thank God there was someone there to save her, but that's how it is. And I think she takes a bit of a piss out of Canada, and that is important. Plus, she spends so much time trying to be white, and I also get that. So, again, I just loved it. I can't sing its praises enough. If you like essays that are humorous about real life, you'll love it. But again, it's not going to be, it's probably more depth for me just because of who I am. And because it resonates with my life, and it reminds me of my situations, my growing up, and actual events that have happened in my life almost parallel some of these. So, if that's not the case, you may not enjoy it as much. I gave it 4 or 5 stars. I probably should go back and give it 5, because I'm still thinking about it, and I'm still loving it. I called my sister-in-law, and I told her to read it. Like, you need this in your life. She's like, are you sure? Yes, you do. Just do it. So, there you have it. And then I finally finished Middlemarch, this big honkin' beastie. I got the Red Spine edition because it was the cheapest, and I like the red spines. I've got a bunch. I ordered a bunch of a book depository. I did a lot of retail therapy between my birthday and my dog passing. My dog passed at the end of April, beginning of May. Subsequently, I did a lot of retail therapy, and then my birthday and anniversary was in May. So, but I finished it, and I loved it. I gave it 4 stars. I would have given it 5, except it took me so long. But I knew I'd love it because I read Adam Bede and Silas Mariner, I believe, are the other George Eliot's. Do these ones have a list of what else they've written? I don't think they do. No. Oh, yes. Adam Bede and Silas Mariner are the ones I've read. I want to read The Mill and the Floss. Oh my God, I loved this book. I loved all the characters. I loved everything that happened. I loved the fact that it happened the way it happened. It was so well written. It just made me happy. There were points where I was very, very bored. Very, very bored. And I expected that to happen. But everything else in this book made up for it. And so we're following basically the lives of people who live in Middlemarch, as people come in, as people go out, and basically what happens in their lives. And that's the wholeness of the book. If you need a huge, giant plot, it's not going to happen. If you like Victorian novels that have a bit of background, then this is for you. So many people read Middlemarch in March, and that's when I started. I don't feel the need to go through it with you. I will move on next to this lovely little one by Ludmila Ulitskaya. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. This is The Funeral Party. I had asked Anna of BB03AAV about some contemporary Russian authors, and she said this name, so I looked up on Amazon her books, and I liked the name, The Funeral Party. So subsequently I picked it up because that's a Cure song. And yeah, so I read it in an afternoon. It's not big. I think it's 150 pages, if that. No, 154. And this just threw me for a loop. Oh my goodness, it's so well written. It's beautiful. It's a story about a group of people who have all immigrated to the United States, and they are all surrounding this one fellow who immigrated to the United States who is dying. And he doesn't have medical coverage, and so the people have brought like Russian folk doctors in. They've found ways to utilize other people's medical coverage for emergency visits. But basically everybody's gathered and waiting for him to die. We have ex-girlfriends, we have current girlfriends, and he's really the glue that's holding all of these expats together as they go about their lives. And we see how he met each of them and what relationship he has to each of them in little vignettes, because this is told from all these different points of view that just keep happening and occurring. And then he dies. and they all kind of scatter to the wind. Some go back to Russia because they can't hack it anymore, and some deepen their friendships based on it. But just this coming together of like a family for these people who can't get back to their family because some of them are not well documented, and as the folk doctor is getting deported and all of this stuff is going on, but this dying man who has, does it actually say what he has? I don't think they do. Basically, he's got the his whole system shutting down, like slowly. His legs have shut down, his arms have shut down. Eventually, he's going to asphyxiate. One of them is a nurse, so he can handle taking care of certain things, like. But basically, death watch. It's a death watch. It's the funeral party as they come and go through these months. So beautifully written, so touching. I had to like pull out the happy kitty fun times afterwards because this was just so gutting. But excuse me, sorry about that. The mail came and it was loud and I had to go grab it. That's how life goes. So anywho, read it. I cannot tell you more enough to read it. I want to go get more of her stuff. That was a win. Up next, The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian by Sherman Alexie. Sherman Alexie is from the area I'm in. I believe he's over in Spokane, which is on the mainland. I'm on the peninsula, but either way, we're in the same state, so I'm claiming him. And this is a YA book. I did not know it was a YA book when I picked it up, and subsequently, so it goes. It is about Junior, who is a young boy who was born with many problems, such as hydrocephaly or water on the brain. And he has bad eyes, he's on the res, and subsequently is way too smart. So he decides that to get out of there and to make his life better, he's going to go to the white school that is about 20 miles away. And his family supports him in this. So he goes and gets a better education. He ends up on a sports team. He works hard. Of course, he's still weird. And as this is going on, he's living a dual life of an Indian in a white world when he's at the white school, or the Indian who's going to a white school when he's back home on the res. Subsequently, people don't want to hang out. I'm saying subsequently way too much. People don't want to hang out with him. He's getting into a lot of fights, but he sees this as a way to get out of the disastrous cycle of alcoholism and death and as he's going through all of this, like, horrible things happen, but that's just how it is on the res. So I have to say that there were portions I really struggled with. Let's see if I can find one. And I don't think you could write it nowadays, because I think that it wouldn't be politically correct to do some of the things and say some of the things he said in here. But perhaps because he's an Indian, he is allowed, or an Aboriginal or Indigenous or whatever you want to call us. But because he is one of us, he's allowed to say it. Like, for instance, this one has illustrations in it. There are illustrations throughout. There's this one. And that's how he felt when he went to his school. He felt, well, the white people being that way to him. And he really struggled with that. I don't know that you could put those kinds of words in a book. However, I laughed so hard I almost choked sometimes because of the Kentucky Fried Chicken thing. Now, that is true of Canadians in the prairies as well. The Canadian First Nations, yes. With the chicken, the shroud of Kentucky Fried Chicken, yes, that's us. So, I am actually going to be giving this to my niece because I think she will really enjoy reading it. I think it is a great book for young adults who are different. Do I think it's a great book for all young adults? Probably not. There's going to be some problems with it. And I honestly think that if you don't have any Indians in your life, this is probably pointless for you, because you won't understand I don't know that a child can fully comprehend what's going on here, unless they're different in some way. If they're different in some way, they will identify with the main character and be able to run through it. And I've decided that based off of this, I'm going to read way more of his adult works. I had always kind of passed him up because I didn't really know who he was, and I got him confused with the guy from The Young Ones, Alexei Sale from The Young Ones. I always thought Sherman Alexie was Alexei Sale. For some reason in my head, yeah, don't even. So, yes. If you have children that are others, or well, not children, teenagers, it's probably, he's going to high school. That's the age bracket you want to hit, or a little bit younger, probably 10 and up. Then, okay, if you're white in middle-class suburbs, you're not going to get it. If you want to read it as an adult, you're great. Go ahead. You'll enjoy it. It's very touching and poignant. Up next was a reread. My husband decided that during this time apart, he's going to get me the entire series of the Drop Cap, sorry. The Drop Cap series by Penguin, which are these gorgeous hardcovers for classics, and it's the alphabet. It's A through Z, and each letter has someone. And A is for Jane Austen, so it's Pride and Prejudice, so I did a reread. It's the only Austen I like, and I've read almost all of them. I think there's one I haven't read. I just don't like Jane Austen at all. I'm a Bronte girl, but I wanted to read it. I enjoyed it. It was perfect fluff. I read it right after my dog passed, and at that point what I did need was just tripe, and this is a Harlequin romance novels for the Victorian era is what it is. I'd much rather read Bridget Jones, which is based off of it, but whatever. Gorgeous book, great version, very sturdy, love size of the writing. Don't really need to say much about Jane Austen. I have two more. We're almost done. Okay? You running with me here? Then I picked out Idaho by Emily Ruskovich. And I have to say, so I read it. I originally heard the premise on Mercedes. She hauled it, Mercedes Bookish Musings, or Mercy's Bookish Musings. And I like the premise. Okay, so you've got a guy who's going through, he's getting dementia, and his wife is in jail for committing a horrible atrocity. And then we've got this new wife who's trying to deal with everything. I thought it was beautifully written. I thought the plot was lacking. And I can get away with that in my head. I don't mind that it didn't have a lot of plot, that we didn't move from point A to point B very quickly, or that like not a lot happened, because it was so well written and so pretty. I did have some problems with some of the animal scenes. I am very sensitive to animal scenes, so if you are, this may not be the happiest of things for you. Also, there is in the The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian, there's also, just skip the chapter when you start hearing about the dog. That's all I'm saying. If you're like me. If you're not, go ahead and read it, but I can't handle it. So there are certain spots where I had to skip over, but I felt that she really loved her characters and was writing about them from a point of love. There's a multifaceted, it's different people's views on different things. We end up not only hearing from the guy who has dementia, the wife who's killed her child, possibly the other child. We don't know what happened to the other child. We never know what happens to the other child. It is not a spoiler. It's pretty much implicit. But, and new wife, and then we hear from the inmate who is with the wife, who's in the same room. They share a cell. So we get all of these different facets of what's going on for a while, and we get a couple of years going on in here, and it's quite nice. So if you really like digging into a family that's really screwed up with something really bad happening and how everybody deals with it, you'll like this. If you want to read about a wife dealing with her husband's failing mental faculties, this is also really good. I 100% enjoyed it. I'll look for her other works, but if you like plot, you're gonna hate this, because it doesn't really go fast and it doesn't really go far. The last book I finished in May, and it was a squeeze, was another horror. It's Spiral by Koji Suzuki? Yep, Koji Suzuki. It is the second in the Ring series. I was trying to get all 3 of them done. I did not, because I was in a weird headspace because of the passing of my dog. I didn't really want to read a lot of horror. Trust me, I had a stack of horror like this big that I was going to get through in the month of May, and I got 2. And I feel like I lost, but I'm okay with that. This one, I was wondering how you would follow up Ring, because that one was like a complete mind boggle. It's so much better than the movie. This one is also so much better than the movie, but this one follows a different group of people who are responding to the original group of people. So the cycle continues. And this time, they're starting to think of it in medical terminology, so it starts taking on a new shape. We don't get as much of an experience with the actual videotape or the thing that starts the ring, but we see the girl come back, what's her name, Sashiko? You know who I'm talking about. She comes back, and basically this is the next part. There are 3 books in the Ring trilogy. They just came out with an afterword, which is called Birthdays. I'll wait until it comes out in paperback because I have to have all my editions match. I'm crazy like that. But I think it's going to be really enjoyable. I'm looking forward to it. If you like horror, if you liked The Ring, this is a good one to go with. It doesn't have as many horror moments. It doesn't have as much implicit horror. It doesn't have as much psychological horror. You have a good couple moments, but for the most part, I would say it's more of a mystery thriller than it is an actual horror. Still, highly enjoyable, very well written. And that's everything I read in May. That has nothing to tell you of the giant stack of books that I have to haul, but I might wait till tomorrow to do that. I don't know. We'll see how I'm feeling. I hope you had a great May. Tell me if you read these, or if you want to read these based off of some of my reviews, or if you'd like me to go more in depth. Maybe drop me a line and tell me, because I probably could. I haven't yet. I hope you have a great June. I hope you have a great reading June. Come join us at the War and Peace Read Along. There's a bunch of us doing it, and I am partaking, so